Don't panic, the scarred alpha whispered, pulling her trembling body against his chest. I'll protect you. Elara Ashwood didn't know the man who held her in the shadows of that black carriage was Varek Blackthorn, the alpha whose name made warriors cross themselves and mothers lock their doors at night. She only knew that Matthias Crane, the merchant lord she was being sold to like livestock, was outside that rain-streaked window with his lantern raised, hunting her like prey. The ivory lace of her wedding gown clung to her skin, soaked through with rain and desperation. She had run 4 blocks through the storm in delicate slippers before throwing herself into this carriage bearing a silver wolf crest that made grown men step aside in fear. Now she pressed herself against the velvet floor, gasping for air that wouldn't come. That's when she became aware of him. The scent hit her first. Pine smoke and leather, wild and expensive, the smell of something untamed barely contained. Then she looked up. Sharp features carved from stone, 3 parallel scars cutting from temple to jaw like claw marks, eyes the color of winter frost that watched her with an intensity that froze the blood in her veins. He sat perfectly still, but she could feel the violence coiled beneath his skin, a predator deciding whether she was worth the trouble. Hello friends. Before we journey deeper into Elara's story, I invite you to subscribe and share in the comments where you're listening from. Your presence here matters. Now let's continue. A shadow fell across the carriage window. Matthias. His face pressed against the glass, breath fogging the surface, lantern swinging in his hand. He began tapping. Slow. Deliberate. Each tap like a death knell. Elara, my darling bride. His voice came muffled but clear through the glass, oil slick and poisonous. Come out now. Be reasonable. We have guests waiting at the cathedral. She whimpered, pressing herself smaller, waiting for the scarred stranger to throw her out to save himself the trouble. Men always chose the path of least resistance. Men always. Instead, Varek Blackthorn leaned forward. His gloved hand settled on her shoulder, surprisingly gentle for someone whose reputation was built on brutality. She flinched, but he didn't pull away. He will not touch you, Varek said, his voice low and absolute as a death sentence. His eyes never left Matthias's face at the window. I'll protect you. He rapped his knuckles twice against the carriage roof. The horses lurched forward. The carriage rolled past Matthias Crane's furious, disbelieving face, leaving him standing in the rain with his lantern and his rage. As the vehicle gathered speed through the storm-dark streets toward the northern edge of the city, toward Blackthorn Hall and whatever fate awaited her there, Elara couldn't silence one burning question. Why had his carriage been parked so perfectly, so conveniently, right outside the cathedral where she was meant to wed a monster? The morning of her wedding, Elara had woken to the sound of her mother weeping. It wasn't the gentle tears of a mother sending her daughter toward happiness. This was the broken, choking grief of a woman who had traded her child's life to preserve her own comfort. The sound echoed through the Ashwood Manor's halls like a ghost mourning itself. The estate had been dying for years. Her father's gambling debts, the failed investments, the mortgage payments that piled up like accusations on his desk. The servants let go one by one until only the most loyal remained, working for promises instead of coin. Then Matthias Crane had appeared like a carrion bird circling a dying animal. He offered to erase every debt, restore the Ashwood name, return them to society's good graces. All he wanted in exchange was Elara. She had met him exactly twice before her father signed the betrothal contract. The first time, Matthias had examined her the way merchants examined horses at market. He'd asked her to turn, to smile, to walk across the room. He'd commented on her teeth, her posture, her hips. Good breeding stock, he'd said to her father as if she weren't standing right there. She'll do nicely. The second meeting, he'd cornered her in the library while her parents entertained his solicitors in the drawing room. He'd backed her against the shelves, one hand braced beside her head, the other settling around her throat. Not squeezing, just resting there like a promise. You'll learn quickly, he'd whispered, his breath reeking of brandy and something darker, something that made her stomach turn. Obedient wives enjoy comfortable lives. Disobedient ones learn to fear the darkness in their own homes. Now 3 months later, as her mother and 2 hollow-eyed maids laced her into the wedding gown, Elara felt like she was being sewn into her own burial shroud. The corset crushed her ribs until breathing became an act of will. The lace scratched against her throat like rope. The veil draped over her face like a widow's mourning cloth. "You look beautiful, darling," her mother said, but she couldn't meet Elara's eyes in the mirror. The cathedral was only 5 blocks from the Ashwood townhouse. Elara was supposed to walk there on her father's arm, a grand procession so all of London's society could witness the Campbell-Ashwood alliance being sealed. But when she stepped outside into the grey morning, her father was already gone. He'd left early, the butler explained with practiced neutrality, to greet the guests. To drink himself brave enough to hand her over, Elara knew. So she walked alone, flanked by 2 footmen whose job wasn't to escort her but to ensure she arrived. They weren't guards. They were jailers in livery. But Elara had learned something in her 21 years of being traded and bargained over like property. She'd learned to watch, to wait, to recognize the single moment when her captors looked away. They were 3 blocks from the cathedral when a street merchant's cart overturned, spilling oranges across the cobblestones in a cascade of bright color against the gray stone. Both footmen turned to look at the commotion. 3 seconds. That's all she had. Elara ran. The wedding slippers were useless on wet stone. Her gown tangled around her legs like grasping hands. She tore the veil from her face and let it fly away into the rain like a ghost taking flight. Behind her she heard shouting. The footmen had noticed. They would catch her within minutes. She turned down an alley, lungs burning, vision blurring with rain and tears. She had no destination, no plan beyond the desperate animal instinct to escape. She would rather die in the gutter than let Matthias Crane claim ownership of her body and soul. That's when she saw it. At the alley's end, parked in the shadow of the cathedral's stone walls as if waiting, sat a black carriage. Not just any carriage. This one bore a crest in silver on its lacquered door, a wolf's head wreathed in thorns. Even Elara, who knew little of the North's political landscape, recognized that symbol. The Blackwood crest. The mark of Varek Blackthorn, the alpha whose name was used to frighten children into obedience. The man who'd returned from the territorial wars with scars on his face and blood on his hands. The alpha who knelt to no one, not even the king. The carriage door stood slightly open as if an invitation. Elara didn't hesitate. She dove inside. Elara pressed herself against the carriage floor, her heart hammering so violently she thought her ribs might crack. The velvet beneath her cheeks smelled of smoke and something wild she couldn't name. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying the carriage was empty, that she could hide here until... "You're bleeding on my upholstery." Her eyes snapped open. She looked up slowly, past polished black boots, past dark trousers and a long coat of midnight leather trimmed with silver fur, until she met the gaze of the man sitting in the shadows. Varek Blackthorn didn't look surprised to find a woman in a wedding dress collapsed on his carriage floor. He looked mildly inconvenienced, the way a wolf might regard a rabbit that had foolishly stumbled into its den. The scars were worse up close. 3 jagged lines carved through his left cheek, angry and red against pale skin, disappearing into the dark scruff of his jaw. But it was his eyes that stopped her breath, winter blue, sharp as ice, and fixed on her with an intensity that made her feel simultaneously seen and dissected. Elara's voice broke. Please don't send me back. To Matthias Crane? Something flickered in Varek's expression, too quick to read. Why would I do that? Because he'll pay you. Because everyone has a price. Because you're the Ashwood girl. It wasn't a question. His voice was rough, like gravel smoothed by centuries of rain. The one being sold to settle your father's debts. She nodded, unable to form words. Varek leaned back, studying her with those wolf-cold eyes. The carriage swayed as they took a corner too fast, and Elara grabbed the seat to keep from sliding. Through the rain-streaked window, she glimpsed the city falling away, replaced by dark forests and empty roads leading north. "Where are you taking me?" she whispered. "Blackthorn Hall." He said it as if the answer were obvious. "You can't stay in the city." Crane will have men searching every inn, every boarding house, every sewer if he must. Then let me go. I'll disappear. You misunderstand. Varek's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm not keeping you prisoner. I'm preventing you from making a fatal mistake. Elara pushed herself up to sitting, though her legs felt like water. You don't know me. Why would you help me? For a long moment he said nothing. The only sounds were the horse's hooves on stone and rain hammering the carriage roof. Then, so quietly she almost missed it, don't I? Before she could ask what he meant, the carriage slowed. Through the window, Elara saw iron gates wreathed with thorny vines opening onto a long drive. At its end stood Blackthorn Hall, a massive stone fortress with towers that clawed at the storm-dark sky, windows glowing like watchful eyes, wolf statues flanking the entrance with teeth bared in eternal warning. Welcome home, Elara. The way he said her name, familiar, possessive, almost tender, sent ice down her spine. Inside the manor, Elara stood dripping on marble floors while servants materialized from the shadows like ghosts. They didn't seem surprised by her presence, which was somehow more unsettling than if they'd stared. Varek led her through corridors lined with dark wood and oil paintings of wolves, always wolves, until they reached a study that smelled of old books and burning cedar. He gestured for her to sit in a chair by the fireplace, then poured 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. Drink, he said, pressing a glass into her shaking hands. You're in shock. The brandy burned her throat, but warmth spread through her chest. She watched him move around the room, lighting candles with practiced efficiency, and realized he moved like a predator even in his own home, balanced, controlled, ready for violence at any moment. There's something you need to see, Varek said finally. He pulled open a drawer in his massive desk and withdrew a leather portfolio. From it, he extracted a single sheet of parchment, yellowed with age, and placed it on the small table beside her. Elara leaned forward, squinting in the firelight. It was a marriage contract. Official seals stamped in wax. Witness signatures. And there, in elegant script at the bottom, 2 names that made the room tilt sideways. Varek Blackthorn, Alpha of the Northern Territories, Elara Ashwood of House Ashwood. The date read 3 years ago. The day after her mother's funeral. No. The word came out strangled. No, we've never. Look at the signature, Elara. She looked. Her own handwriting stared back at her. The specific way she looped her R, the flourish on the slight smudge where she always dragged her palm across wet ink. It was hers. Undeniably, impossibly hers. I don't understand. Her hands trembled so badly the parchment shook. I don't remember this. I don't remember you. I know. Varek's voice held something that might have been pain, carefully controlled. You asked me to let you forget. That's insane. Why would I? You came to me 3 years ago. He moved closer, firelight casting shadows across his scarred face. Desperate. Terrified. Begging for protection from a threat you couldn't name. You said there were things happening to you, things you didn't understand. We married under the full moon in a blood ceremony. The bond cannot be broken. Elara's mind raced, searching for memories that weren't there. That year was clear in her mind. Grief over her mother, managing the crumbling estate, her father's descent into drinking. There were no gaps, no missing time. Yet here was proof. The next morning, Varek continued, his voice carefully neutral, you begged me to let you go home. You said you needed time, that you'd return when you were ready. I agreed. His jaw tightened. You never came back. So you just waited? I watched over you from a distance. Ensured you were safe. He poured himself more brandy, drank it in one swallow. When I learned of your betrothal to Matthias Crane, I knew I had to intervene. Under territorial law, you're my wife, Elara. Your betrothal to Crane was bigamy. You could be executed for it. The room spun. You're lying. This is some trick, some... Why would I lie? Varek's eyes flashed. I don't need to trick you into staying. You came to me. You're here because you chose this carriage, this path. I chose to escape Matthias, not... She stood abruptly, the brandy glass tumbling from her hands. It shattered on the marble hearth. I don't know you. I've never seen you before tonight. Something in his expression cracked just for a moment. Grief raw and deep. I know, he said quietly. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? He led her through more corridors to a suite of rooms in the manor's east wing. The guest chambers were lavish. Silk curtains, a canopied bed, a fire already crackling in the hearth. Elara stood in the doorway, numb. Rest, Varek said. We'll talk more tomorrow. Am I a prisoner? You're my wife. Under my protection. Whether you remember it or not. That's not an answer. He paused at the threshold. The door locks from the inside, not out. You're free to leave whenever you wish. His eyes met hers. But I wouldn't recommend wandering the northern roads at night. There are worse things than me in these forests. He left, pulling the door closed behind him with a soft click. Elara stood frozen, then slowly walked to the door. He tried the handle. It turned freely. Not locked. But when she opened it, she found 2 guards stationed in the hallway. For her protection, presumably. Or to ensure she didn't run. She closed the door and leaned against it, sliding down to the floor. Only then did she notice details that made her blood run cold. On the nightstand sat a vase of lavender, her favorite flower, though she'd never told anyone. The bookshelf held volumes she loved, including a rare edition of poetry she'd been searching for. And on the wall hung a portrait of a woman who looked heartbreakingly like her mother. Elara crawled to the bed and discovered something that stopped her breath entirely. There, on her left ring finger, was a thin white scar she'd always had but never questioned. The kind of scar you'd get from a blade drawn across skin. The kind used in blood ceremonies. Her hands shaking, she pressed her palm against the cold window glass and looked out at the storm. In the courtyard below, she saw Varek standing in the rain, looking up at her window. Even from this distance she could see the pain in his eyes. A man watching someone he loved fail to recognize him. And for the first time Elara felt something besides fear. Guilt. 3 days. Elara had been at Blackthorn Hall for 3 days, and she was no closer to understanding the impossible truth of that marriage contract than she'd been the first night. She'd spent those days locked in her chambers, not by force but by choice. Every time she considered venturing out, she'd catch sight of that portrait on the wall, or the lavender on her nightstand, or the scar on her ring finger, and the questions would paralyze her all over again. But on the 4th morning, hunger and restlessness finally drove her from her sanctuary. The manor was a labyrinth of stone corridors and shadowed alcoves. Servants moved like ghosts through the halls, nodding respectfully when they passed her but never speaking unless spoken to. Elara had tried engaging a few in conversation, hoping for information about Varek or this alleged marriage, but they'd all deflected with practiced politeness. She'd been avoiding Varek himself. Twice she'd heard his voice echoing from other rooms and had turned down different corridors to escape. She wasn't ready to face those winter blue eyes and the accusations they held, not accusations of wrongdoing but something worse. Accusations of forgetting. On the morning of her 4th day, Elara encountered someone new. She was descending a staircase when she nearly collided with a young woman carrying linens. The maid couldn't have been more than 16. With copper-red hair and freckles scattered across her nose like constellations. "Oh, I'm sorry, my lady," the girl gasped, dropping into a curtsy that nearly sent her linens tumbling. "It's all right," Elara said quickly. "I wasn't watching where I was going." She paused. "What's your name?" The girl looked startled to be asked. "Anna, my lady." "Anna." Elara offered what she hoped was a friendly smile. "How long have you worked here?" "4 years, my lady. Since I was 12. 4 years. That meant Anna had been here during the time Elara supposedly married Varek. Have you seen me before? Before 3 days ago, I mean." Anna's eyes widened and something flickered across her face. Recognition quickly suppressed. I shouldn't say, my lady. His Grace wouldn't want me speaking about." "Please," Elara interrupted, stepping closer. "I'm not trying to get you in trouble. I just need to know the truth. Was I here before?" The young maid bit her lip, glancing down the corridor to ensure they were alone. "Yes, my lady," she whispered finally. 3 years ago. You stayed for 6 months in the tower rooms." Elara's heart lurched. tower rooms. Anna's hand flew to her mouth as if she'd said too much. I shouldn't have. Please, my lady, if his grace finds out I told you. He won't, Elara promised. I swear it. But Anna, which tower? Where are these rooms? The girl hesitated, loyalty and sympathy warring on her face. Finally, sympathy won. The East Tower, my lady. But it's locked now. It's been locked since the lady left. The lady. Elara's breath caught. They called me that? Anna nodded, tears welling in her eyes. Everyone loved you, my lady. You were kind to the servants, always helping in the kitchens, laughing in the gardens. When you left, His Grace locked the tower and forbade anyone from entering. She leaned closer, her voice dropping to barely a whisper. We all hoped you'd come back. That night, when the manor settled into sleeping silence, Elara crept from her chambers with a candle clutched in trembling hands. Finding the East Tower proved easier than expected. It was as if her feet remembered the path even when her mind didn't. Through the portrait gallery, down a narrow servants' passage, behind a tapestry depicting wolves hunting under a full moon. There, a wooden door reinforced with iron bands, a heavy lock securing it shut. Elara's heart sank. She should have known it wouldn't be. Wait. Beside the door stood a stone statue of a wolf, its mouth open in a silent howl. On instinct she couldn't explain, Elara reached into the sculpted maw. Her fingers brushed cold metal. A key. Her hands shook as she fitted it into the lock. The mechanism turned with a groan of protest, and the door swung open to reveal a spiral staircase climbing up into darkness. Elara began to climb. The stairs seemed endless, winding up and up until her thighs burned and her breathing came in gasps. Finally, she reached another door at the top. This one was unlocked. The room beyond stole her breath. It was circular, with windows overlooking the northern forests, now silver under moonlight. Dust motes danced in the air, disturbed by her entrance after 3 years of stillness. The furniture was covered in white cloths like shrouded ghosts, but everything else remained exactly as it must have been the day she'd left. Books stacked on a reading table. A shawl draped over a chair. Dried flowers in a vase, their colors faded to brown. And there, on a desk beneath the largest window, sat a stack of leather-bound journals. Elara approached them as if they might vanish if she moved too quickly. Her candle illuminated the cover of the topmost journal. No title, just a date embossed in gold. 3 years ago, the week after her mother's funeral. She opened it with trembling hands. The handwriting on the first page was unmistakably hers. I don't know where else to go. Papa is drowning in grief and debts, and there's something happening to me that I don't understand. The lights. The burning. Yesterday I shattered every window in my bedchamber without touching them. I'm terrified of what I'm becoming. But Mother told me once before she died, that if I was ever in danger, I should seek the Alpha of the North. She said he would understand. She said he owed her a debt. So tomorrow I leave for Blackthorn Hall. Elara's vision blurred with tears. She turned the pages, reading her own words describing a journey north, her first meeting with Varek, her fear transforming slowly into trust. Then weeks later, Varek says I'm a Lumenbearer. Like Mother was. The lights that appear when I'm frightened, that's my power awakening. He says it's beautiful, that I shouldn't fear it. He's teaching me to control it. Today I created an orb of light in my palm and held it for a full minute without burning myself. He smiled at me. A real smile, not the careful ones he shows everyone else. I think I'm falling in love with him. Page after page chronicled her growing power, her deepening feelings, her happiness in this tower room away from the world's expectations. Then the entries grew darker. The dreams are getting worse. Shadows consuming everything. A voice calling my name, promising to finish what it started with Mother. Varek says it's Matthias Crane, a shadow weaver who murdered Mother to steal her power. He wants me to. There's a prophecy about Lumenbearers and shadow weavers, about bindings and sacrifice. I'm so afraid. Elara's hands shook as she read the final entry, dated the night after her wedding to Varek. We married tonight under the full moon. Blood and vows and promises. I've never felt more complete, more whole, more myself than I did in his arms. But the prophecy terrifies me. 7 bindings. 7 moons. With each one, I lose more of myself until nothing remains but power. I can't do it. I can't become a vessel, can't lose who I am. Tomorrow I'm going to find the memory witch in the western woods. I'll ask her to take it all. The memories, the power, the knowledge of what I'm meant to become. Let me be ordinary. Let me be safe. Forgive me, Varek. Forgive me for being too weak to be what they need me to be. I love you. I'll always love you. But I can't watch myself disappear. The journal fell from Elara's hands. She'd done this to herself. Chosen to forget. Chosen to erase the man she'd loved, the powers she'd feared, the destiny she'd tried to escape. All of it gone because she'd been too frightened to face what she was. So now you know. Elara spun around, nearly dropping her candle. Varek stood in the doorway, his scarred face half in shadow. How long had he been there? How much had he watched her read? I erased myself, she whispered. I erased you. Yes. Why did you let me? His jaw tightened. Because you begged me to. Because you stood in this very room with tears streaming down your face and said you'd rather forget me than lose yourself to the prophecy. What was I supposed to do? Force you to stay? Force you to become something you feared? You could have stopped me. Hidden the witch's location. Locked me in. You weren't my prisoner, Elara. You were my wife. My partner. His voice cracked slightly. And if keeping you meant watching you disappear piece by piece into something inhuman, I'd rather let you go and hope you'd choose to come back. But I didn't come back. No. He stepped into the room and she saw the 3 years of pain written in every line of his face. You built a new life. Forgot everything. I watched from a distance, hoping every day you'd remember. That something would trigger the memories. And then Matthias. Arranged your betrothal. Yes. Varek's eyes flashed with cold fury. He knew what you were all along. He killed your mother. He's been waiting for you to come of age to manifest your full powers. The betrothal was never about your father's debts. It was about claiming you for himself. Elara looked down at the journals scattered at her feet, at the evidence of a life she'd lived and loved and abandoned. The question is, Varek said quietly, his winter blue eyes searching hers, will you run again? Varek's question hung in the air between them like a blade suspended by thread. Elara stood among the scattered journals, her past spread at her feet in leather and ink, and felt rage building in her chest. Run. The word came out sharp. You let me erase 3 years of my life. You watched me forget myself, and you did nothing. I did what you asked. I was 21 years old and terrified. Elara's voice rose. I was a girl who'd just lost her mother, discovered she had powers that could kill, and learned she was destined to lose herself to save the world. You should have fought for me. Should have. Should have what? Varek stepped closer and she saw the leashed fury in his eyes. Locked you in a tower like a prisoner? Forced you to accept a fate you didn't choose? You think I haven't spent 3 years wondering if I made the right choice? His voice dropped to something raw. Every day, Elara. Every single day I watched you from a distance, watched you rebuild a life without me, and I died a little more. The anger drained from her, replaced by something more complicated. You could have told me the truth the moment I climbed into your carriage. Would you have believed me? His laugh was bitter. Or would you have thought me mad? A scarred alpha claiming you were his wife when you had no memory of ever meeting me? She couldn't answer because he was right. Varek ran a hand through his dark hair, exhaustion evident in every line of his body. I let you forget because you begged me to. I watched you leave because I loved you enough to let you go. And I parked my carriage outside that cathedral because I refused to let Matthias Crane finish what he started. He met her eyes. So no, I won't apologize for respecting your choices. Even when they broke me. The silence stretched between them, heavy with 3 years of grief and guilt and love that survived erasure. Finally, Elara spoke. Tell me everything. No more half-truths. No more protection. If I'm supposed to be your partner, your equal, then treat me like one. Something shifted in Varek's expression, relief mixed with respect. All right, he said quietly. But you won't like what you hear. I haven't liked anything I've learned in the past 4 days. She gestured at the journals. What's one more nightmare? Varek led her back down to his study, where he built up the fire and poured them both brandy. The amber liquid burned going down, but Elara welcomed the warmth. She needed something to anchor her as Varek pulled ancient texts from locked cabinets and spread them across his desk. Your mother was a Lumenbearer, he began, opening a tome bound in white leather. One of the last of her kind. Women born with the ability to wield light magic, the only force capable of destroying shadow weavers. Shadow weavers? Elara leaned forward, studying the illustrations in the book. Dark figures wreathed in smoke and shadow, their faces hidden but their hands outstretched as if to grasp. Practitioners of forbidden magic thought extinct for 2 centuries. They consume life force to extend their own existence, corrupt everything they touch, turn light into darkness. Varek's jaw tightened. Matthias Crane is one of them. The room tilted. That's impossible. He's a merchant lord, He's a monster who's been alive for over 300 years. Varek pulled out another book, this one filled with newspaper clippings and handwritten notes. He changes identities every few decades. Different names, different cities, always emerging with unexplained wealth and leaving behind a trail of dead women. Elara's hands shook as she looked through the evidence. Drawings of men who could have been Matthias's twins, dating back centuries. Marriage records. Death certificates. Always the same pattern. Wealthy man marries young woman, she dies within a year, he disappears with her fortune. 3 years ago, Varek continued, his voice hardening, Matthias murdered your mother. No. Elara's breath caught. Mother died of fever. The physicians said. The physicians were wrong. Or paid to lie. He showed her a page from his notes. Your mother was killed because Matthias needed her blood to complete a ritual. He thought consuming a Lumenbearer's power would make him unstoppable. But it didn't work. Why not? Because your mother had already passed her gift to you. Varek's winter blue eyes met hers. That's how Lumenbearer powers work. The magic transfers from mother to daughter before death. A safeguard against exactly what Matthias attempted. Your mother died protecting you, making sure you'd have the power to fight him. Elara's vision blurred with tears. She'd spent 3 years thinking her mother died from illness, never knowing she'd been murdered. Never knowing she'd been sacrificed to save her daughter. When you came to me 3 years ago, Varek said gently, your powers were awakening because of your grief. Lumenbearer magic responds to emotion. You were shattering windows, starting fires, creating light without meaning to. You knew something was wrong but not what. Your mother's last words to you were to seek me out if you were ever in danger. Because she knew you, Elara realized. The journal mentioned you owed her a debt. She saved my pack when I was young. Shadow weavers attacked us during the territorial wars. I was the only survivor. Your mother found me, used her light magic to destroy the creatures hunting me. I swore I'd protect her daughter if she ever needed it. The pieces were falling into place, a horrible puzzle revealing a picture Elara wished she couldn't see. Matthias has been orchestrating your betrothal since your mother's death, Varek continued. Not for your dowry. Not to clear your father's debts. Your father's debts are manufactured, Elara. Matthias has shadow magic. He can influence weak minds, plant suggestions, manipulate circumstances. He made your father gamble away the family fortune. He arranged for every solution to fail until only one option remained, selling you into marriage. So he could consume my power. Elara felt sick. Like he tried with mother. Yes. But marriage would give him legal rights to you, make the ritual easier. He could take his time draining your light instead of killing you outright. Elara stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain lashed against the glass, the storm outside matching the chaos in her mind. Why didn't you tell me this immediately? Why the games with the marriage contract? Because you needed to remember on your own. Varek joined her at the window. If I'd simply told you everything, you would have thought me mad. But finding your journals, reading your own words, that you could believe. He hated that he was right. There's something else you need to know, Varek said quietly. About why I care so deeply about stopping Matthias. Why I've spent years hunting him. Tell me. His reflection in the rain-streaked glass looked haunted. I had a sister, Lyanna. 5 years ago she was forced into marriage with a nobleman named Lord Ashford. She was 17. Within 6 months she was dead. The official ruling was an accident. She fell from a balcony. But I knew better. Matthias, Elara breathed. Ashford was one of his shadow-corrupted servants. A puppet. Matthias used my sister as a test, a trial run before he targeted your mother. I didn't discover the truth until after Lyanna died. By then it was too late. Varek's voice cracked. I couldn't save my sister. But I swore I'd save you. Elara turned to face him fully. Is that why you married me? Guilt over Lyanna? No. He met her eyes and she saw the truth there, naked and painful. I married you because you were brave and brilliant and kind. Because you made me laugh for the first time since the wars ended. Because when I looked at you, I saw a future worth fighting for. His hand lifted as if to touch her face, then fell. Protecting you from Matthias was my duty. Loving you was my choice. The words hung between them, 3 years too late and perfectly timed. I don't remember loving you, Elara said quietly. I've read about it in those journals, but I don't feel it. I know. But I remember being terrified of Matthias. I remember his hand on my throat. His threats. She straightened her spine. And I remember what my mother did. Sacrificed herself to save me. I won't let that be for nothing. What are you saying? I'm saying I don't need to remember the past to choose the present. Elara held his gaze. You asked if I'd run again. The answer is no. But I'm not staying because of a contract I don't remember signing. I'm staying because Matthias Crane murdered my mother, tried to murder me, and will continue murdering until someone stops him. Her hands clenched into fists. I want to learn to use my powers. I want to fight. And I need your help. For the first time since she'd climbed into his carriage 4 days ago, Varek smiled. A real smile, not the careful, controlled expression he showed the world. Then tomorrow, he said, we begin your training. Elara woke to smoke. The acrid smell filled her lungs before her eyes opened. When they did, she saw charred bedsheets beneath her hands, still smoldering with embers. Black scorch marks spread outward from perfect handprints, edges glowing faint orange. Her hands blazed with golden light. No, she whispered, scrambling backward. She fell off the bed, palms pressed against cold floor, but the glow only intensified, responding to her fear like kindling to flame. The door burst open. Varek filled the doorway, taking in the scene with one sweeping glance. Smoking bed, terrified woman, glowing hands. It's beginning, he said. Your powers are waking up. Kale appeared behind him with water, dousing the sheets. Steam hissed into pre-dawn air. Not unusual, he said calmly. The Duchess did the same thing her first week. Set 3 rooms ablaze before she learned control. The Duchess. Her. 3 years ago. I can't control it, Elara gasped as the glow spread up her wrists. The floorboards beneath her palms began to blacken. Varek, I'll burn you. He knelt and took her hands. She waited for him to scream. Instead, impossibly, the wild golden light calmed. It didn't disappear, but it stopped spreading, stopped burning, stopped consuming. How? Balance. His thumbs traced circles on her hands, grounding her. Light and darkness, moon and sun. Your power recognizes mine. We anchor each other. The glow dimmed to barely visible threads beneath her skin. This is why you erased your memories, Varek said quietly. The power frightened you. Elara stared at their joined hands. She remembered nothing, yet her body knew this. Knew him. I need to learn control, she said. Before I hurt someone. Before Matthias. Then we start now. He pulled her up. Meet me in the courtyard at dawn. It's not even dawn. His scarred mouth curved. You have 10 minutes. The courtyard was frost-covered, her breath misting. Varek waited in the center, dressed in dark leather, scars pronounced in gray light. Take off the cloak, he instructed. It's freezing. Your power runs hot. Trust me. She let it fall, shivering in thin training clothes. Close your eyes, Varek said. Feel the power inside you. Not as something foreign. As part of yourself. Elara searched inward. The first nothing. Then there. Like banked coals in her chest, warm and waiting. Good. Now breathe into it. The warmth grew, spreading through her chest, down her arms into her fingertips. Open your eyes. Her hands blazed with golden light, bright enough to see every bone beneath her skin. But this time no smoke. No burning. You're in control, Varek said. This is what control looks like. It doesn't feel controlled. Then let it out. Fully. Create a sphere. Insane. But she focused on her palm, trying to picture it. The glow concentrated, pulling inward. Slowly, a sphere of pure golden light formed above her hand. Small, trembling, but it held. I'm doing it, she whispered. The sphere exploded. Light and heat knocked her backward. Varek's hands gripped her shoulders, pulling her upright. Emotional trigger, he said. The power responds to feelings. You felt pride, lost concentration. Elara wanted to argue, but she remembered her mother. Lyanna. Every woman Matthias had destroyed. Again, she said. They trained for hours. By sunrise she could hold the sphere for a full minute. By mid-morning she could move it between her hands. By noon, exhausted and aching, she could extinguish and reignite it at will. And with each victory memories surfaced. Training here 3 years ago. Laughing when she'd set Varek's coat on fire. The patient way he'd coached her. Falling in love with him. The realization hit mid-sphere. She looked up at Varek, demonstrating the breathing technique for the 10th time without complaint, and saw not just the feared alpha. She saw the man who'd let her go when she begged. Who'd watched over her for 3 years. Who'd whispered, I'll protect you. The sphere flared brighter. Careful, Varek warned, but his eyes held something warmer than instruction. He moved closer. His hand lifted to guide her wrist, but the touch felt like more than teaching. Alarm bells shattered the moment. Varek transformed instantly. The patient teacher vanished, replaced by warrior alpha. Get inside. Kale. Report. Shadow corrupted, your grace. At least 20. They've breached the walls. Elara saw them, dark forms scrambling over stone like spiders, wreathed in shadow. Moving wrong, too fast, limbs bending impossibly. Safe room, Varek barked, his body rippling. Bones cracked and reformed, skin sprouting silver fur. Within seconds, a massive wolf creature towered over her, all claws and fangs. The beast snarled once, then bounded toward battle. Guards shouted. Steel clashed. Something screamed. 2 maids grabbed Elara's arms. This way, my lady. But she stood frozen, watching through a window as Varek's beast form tore through the creatures. Black ichor sprayed. Bodies disintegrated to smoke. Then one broke away. It flowed through a shattered window, liquid darkness, heading straight for their corridor. Run, a maid shrieked. They fled. The creature pursued, clicking and skittering. The safe room was 3 corridors away. They'd never make it. The maid stumbled. Shadow tendrils reached. Elara turned and thrust her hands forward. Golden light exploded from her palms. The creature shrieked, disintegrating from the inside out. Shadows peeled away in smoking ribbons, revealing something twisted underneath before that too crumbled to ash. Then she felt it die. The psychic echo hit her like a fist. Elara collapsed, retching as phantom agony raced through her. She'd killed it. Felt it scream inside her mind. 3 more shapes moved in the shadows. Elara raised her hands. Golden light blazed. The creatures screamed and burned. She felt each death like hammer blows, but she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. Until all 3 lay as smoking ash. Silence rang in her ears. Elara knelt amid the ashes, shaking while burning her throat. Elara. Varek stood at the corridor's end, human again, blood and ichor splattered across torn clothes. He crossed to her and pulled her against his chest. I killed them, she whispered. I felt them die. All of them. I know. His arms tightened. This is the price every Lumenbearer pays. You don't just destroy shadow corruption. You feel it end. How do you live with it? By remembering death was mercy, not murder. That you saved lives today. He pulled back to look at her face. Are you hurt? No. Physically fine. Emotionally shattered. Cale approached. Your Grace. We interrogated one before it died. Matthias Crane knows she's here. And he's not coming with soldiers next time. Varek's arms tightened. What is he coming with? Cale's voice dropped to a whisper. The convergence. He's going to force the prophecy. 3 nights from now on the full moon. The War Council convened in Blackwood Hall's Great Hall as dawn broke over the Northern Territories. Elara sat at the massive oak table, still wearing yesterday's blood-stained training clothes, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she couldn't bring herself to drink. The warmth felt wrong against her palms, reminded her too much of the golden light, of the deaths she'd felt like echoes in her bones. Varek stood at the head of the table, transformed back into the commanding alpha his reputation promised. Dark circles shadowed his eyes. He hadn't slept. Neither had she. Cale spread maps across the table, marking positions with small carved wolves. The cathedral is here at the edge of the old forest. 3 nights gives us time to fortify, position archers, set traps. It won't matter. The voice came from the doorway. An elderly woman entered, bent with age but moving with surprising grace. Her eyes were milky white, blind, yet she walked unerringly to an empty chair and sat. She wore layers of tattered shawls, her gnarled fingers heavy with silver rings. The memory witch, Varek said quietly to Elara. The one who took your memories 3 years ago. The witch's sightless eyes turned toward Elara with unnerving precision. I warned you then, child. Forgetting doesn't unmake destiny. It only delays the reckoning. Why are you here? Elara managed. Because the prophecy is coming due. And you need to understand what you're truly facing. The witch gestured, and Cale produced an ancient book from a locked chest, its cover bound in white leather that might once have been beautiful but now looked aged and cracked. Varek opened it carefully, turning pages until he found what he sought. The prophecy of the last Lumenbearer, he read aloud. When shadow rises and the moon turns blood red, the last Lumenbearer must bind with the beast. One path leads to salvation, all darkness destroyed. The other path leads to oblivion, territories consumed by shadow. He paused, jaw tightening before continuing. But salvation demands a price. 7 bindings under 7 moons. With each binding, the Lumenbearer loses part of her humanity, until nothing remains but power, eternal and empty. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. This is what I was running from, Elara whispered. Varek's winter-blue eyes met hers across the table. I've spent 3 years searching for another way. Every witch consulted, every ancient text studied. There has to be another path. There isn't. The memory witch's voice was absolute. I've lived 200 years. I've seen 3 Lumenbearers face this choice. 2 chose to run. Their territories fell to shadow within a generation. 1 chose to bind. She destroyed the shadow weaver of her age. The witch leaned forward. But she also destroyed herself. By the 7th binding she couldn't remember her own name. Couldn't feel love or joy or sorrow. Just power, burning through her like eternal fire. I won't let you sacrifice yourself, Varek said, his voice rough with emotion. Cale cleared his throat. Your Grace, we're out of time. Matthias will force the first binding whether we're ready or not. The convergence gives him the power to do it. Explain, Elara demanded. The memory witch answered. Every century when the stars align and the moon turns red, the barrier between our world and the shadow realm weakens. A shadow weaver can use that moment to force a binding ritual, consuming a Lumenbearer's power against her will. 3 nights from now Matthias will have that chance. If he succeeds, he'll drain you slowly over years, using your light to feed his darkness. But if we perform the binding ourselves first? Elara asked, already knowing the answer. Then you control it, Varek said quietly. The binding connects us, your light to my beast. Together we become something capable of destroying him. But Elara, the cost. How many people will die if Matthias wins? She cut him off. How many daughters will be sold like I was? How many mothers murdered like mine? How many lionesses? Using his sister's name was cruel, but Elara needed him to understand. This wasn't about protecting her anymore. It was about preventing the next 300 years of Matthias Crane's monstrous existence. Varek's hands gripped the table edge. I can't watch you disappear. Not again. Then don't let me disappear. Elara stood, circling the table to face him directly. You said we're balance, light and dark, moon and sun. After each binding, help me remember who I am. It's not that simple, isn't it? She reached for his scarred hands. Anchor me. Fight for my humanity as hard as I'll fight for the territories. You said you couldn't save Lyanna. But Varek, you can save me. Not by preventing the binding. By making sure I survive it with my soul intact. The memory which watched them with her blind eyes, a small smile playing at her lips. The prophecy never accounted for that, did it? A bond forged in partnership rather than force. An alpha willing to share the burden rather than simply use the power. She stood, shawls rustling. There might be hope after all. What do you mean? Varek demanded. The Lumenbearers who lost themselves, they were alone. Used by their alphas as weapons, then discarded when they became too powerful to control. But you too. The witch's milky eyes moved between them. You chose each other. That choice might make all the difference. Elara felt something shift in the room, in her chest, in the space between her and Varek. I'm doing this, she said firmly. The binding. But on one condition. Anything. If there's even a chance of another way, we take it. We search for it together even after the binding. Promise me you won't give up on finding a better path. Varek's hands tightened on hers. The moment stretched, heavy with decision and consequence. Finally he nodded. On one condition of my own. After each binding you let me help you remember. No matter how much you want to forget, no matter how much it hurts, you stay with me. Deal. Their clasped hands glowed faintly, her gold mixing with a silver shimmer from his touch. The balance they created visible and real. Cale broke the moment. Your Grace, there's something else. He held up a piece of parchment, the edges burned and curled. A corrupted raven brought this at dawn. From Matthias. Varek took it, his jaw tightening as he read. Then he handed it to Elara without a word. The message was written in blood. Dearest Elara, my wayward bride. I know what you are now. Your mother screamed beautifully when I drained her light. You'll scream too, but I'll make it last much longer. The Duke cannot protect you from destiny. 3 nights. The old cathedral. The convergence comes. Bring yourself willingly and I'll kill you quickly. Make me hunt you and I'll destroy everyone you've ever loved. Starting with your pathetic father. The choice is yours, little light. But we both know you'll come. You always were too noble for your own good. MC. Rage burned through Elara's chest, hot and clean. Her hands blazed with golden light before she could stop them, and the parchment incinerated to ash in her grip. He's threatening my father, she said, voice shaking. Despite everything he's done, despite selling me, I can't. It's a trap, Varek said. He wants to separate us. Wants you vulnerable and alone. I know. Elara forced her hands to stop glowing. But he's right about one thing. I will come. Just not the way he expects. She turned to face the assembled council. The memory witch. 3 of Varek's most trusted warriors who'd entered during the reading. All watching her with varying degrees of concern and respect. We go to the cathedral, Elara announced. But on our terms. We perform the binding before he can force it. And then we end him. Agreed, Varek said. Cale, I want the pack positioned around the cathedral perimeter. Archers in the ruins, ground forces hidden in the forest. When we emerge from the binding, they'll be ready. And the civilians, one warrior asked. If Matthias has corrupted servants throughout the city. Evacuate the surrounding villages, Varek ordered. Quietly. We don't want to alert him that we know he's coming. The council moved into strategic planning. Maps were studied, forces allocated, weapons prepared. Elara watched it all with a strange detachment. In 3 nights she would bind herself to Varek. Would become something neither fully herself nor fully him. Would take the first step down a path that ended in either salvation or oblivion. The memory which touched her arm as the council dispersed. A word, child. They moved to a quiet corner of the hall. The witch's blind eyes seemed to see straight through Elara's skull into her terrified soul. You're afraid, the witch observed. Of course I'm afraid. Good. Fear will keep you human longer than any other emotion. The witch pulled something from her shawls, a small silver locket on a tarnished chain. This belonged to the last Lumenbearer I knew, the one who chose to bind. After the 7th binding, when she could no longer remember her own face, she opened this locket every morning and stared at the portrait inside, trying to recognize herself. Elara took the locket with trembling hands. Inside was a miniature painting of a woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile. She looked happy. Human. Did it work? Elara whispered. Did she remember? No. The witch's voice was gentle with old grief. But she tried. Every single day until the shadow returned and she had to fight again. That's all any of us can do, child. Try. That night, Elara stood at her window watching the moon, still white, not yet blood red. 2 more nights. Then everything would change. Behind her, Varek's reflection appeared in the glass. You don't have to do this, he said quietly. Elara turned to face him. He looked tired, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. The fierce alpha stripped down to just a man who'd already lost too much. Yes, I do. She held out her hand. But I won't do it alone. After a moment, Varek took it. His calloused palm fit perfectly against hers, and she felt the balance again, that sense of completion that came from their joined powers. Together, he agreed, his voice rough. Until the end. But Elara couldn't help wondering. Whose end? Matthias's? Or hers? The night of the full moon arrived wrapped in unnatural silence. No birds sang in the northern forests. No wind rustled the trees. Even the horses moved quietly as Varek's war party rode toward the old cathedral, as if nature itself held its breath for what was coming. Elara rode beside Varek, dressed in white. Not a wedding gown this time, but warrior's leathers dyed pale as moonlight. The memory which had insisted. The binding requires purity of intention, she'd said. White for new beginnings, even if those beginnings taste like endings. The cathedral rose from the forest like a rotted tooth. Once beautiful, now corrupted, its stone blackened, its stained glass windows shattered into jagged teeth, its holy altar stained with centuries of Matthias's dark rituals. Shadow corruption crawled across its walls like living vines, pulsing with sick purple light. And there, at the cathedral's entrance, stood Matthias Crane. He looked different than Elara remembered. The merchant lord's carefully maintained appearance had cracked, revealing something ancient and terrible underneath. Shadow writhed beneath his skin like worms, his eyes glowed with unnatural light, and when he smiled his teeth looked too sharp, too many. At his feet, chained to the defiled altar, knelt her father. Lord Thomas Ashwood looked like he'd aged a decade in the week since Elara fled her wedding. Broken, weeping, but alive. Right on time, Matthias purred, his voice layered with echoes of every soul he'd consumed. I knew you wouldn't disappoint. Elara's hands blazed with golden light before she could stop them. Careful, darling. Matthias placed one hand on her father's shoulder and Lord Ashwood screamed. Shadow corruption spread from Matthias's touch like poison. One wrong move and I turn him into one of my creatures. Imagine, your own father hunting you through the forests, mindless and hungry. Let him go, Elara demanded, dismounting. Your quarrel is with me. Oh, I'll let him go. Eventually. After I've drained every drop of your light and used your empty husk to birth a new age of shadow across these pathetic territories. Around the cathedral, Elara sensed Varek's forces moving into position. Kale and 50 warriors hidden in the ruins and trees. Archers on the surrounding hills. A trap within a trap. But first the binding. Varek stood beside her, and Matthias's expression curdled with recognition and hatred. The Alpha. Of course you'd run to him. Just like your mother ran to his pack all those years ago. His smile turned vicious. Did he tell you? Your precious mother saved his life. And how did I repay that kindness? I tore her apart and drank her light like wine. Rage exploded through Elara. Golden light erupted from her hands, a beam of pure radiance aimed straight at Matthias's heart. He laughed and raised his own hand. Shadow met light in a clash that shook the cathedral's foundations. The beam split around him, scorching the stone walls but leaving him untouched. You're not strong enough, little Lumenbearer. Not yet. But don't worry. His eyes glowed brighter. I'll fix that. Matthias began his own ritual. Dark words in a language that hurt to hear spilled from his lips. Shadow chains materialized from nothing, whipping toward Elara like living serpents. They wrapped around her wrists, her throat, her chest, pulling her toward Matthias and his altar of corruption. Elara screamed, fighting against them, but they were made of darkness and nightmare. Her light burned against them but couldn't break through. She felt her power being drained, pulled into the chains, feeding Matthias's ritual. Elara! Varek's roar shook the earth. He transformed mid-leap. Man became beast in a blur of silver fur and lethal grace. The massive wolf creature that was Varek crashed into the shadow chains, tearing them with fangs and claws that glowed with their own pale radiance. The chains shattered. Elara fell to the stone floor, gasping. Now, Varek's voice rumbled from the beast's throat, barely human. Do it now. Matthias laughed, beginning another incantation. More shadow creatures poured from the cathedral's depths, dozens of them, corrupted and hungry. Elara understood. They were out of time, out of options. She reached for Varek with everything she had. Their hands met, human palm to massive paw, and the world exploded into light and shadow. Time stopped. Reality fractured. Elara felt herself pulled into Varek's consciousness and him into hers. No barriers. No secrets. Just complete, terrifying fusion. She experienced his memories flooding through her like water breaking a dam. A child watching his pack slaughtered by shadow weavers, blood on snow, screaming for parents who would never answer. Years later, a kind woman with gentle hands pulling him from darkness. Elara's mother, glowing with golden light, destroying the monsters that hunted him. Growing up alone, building a reputation of fear to hide the grief. Meeting young Elara for the first time, terrified, grieving, blazing with uncontrolled power, and seeing the daughter of the woman who'd saved him. Teaching her to control her gifts. Watching her transform from frightened girl to powerful woman. The exact moment he realized he loved her. Their wedding under the full moon 3 years ago. Blood mingling, vows spoken, the perfect balance of light and dark. His heartbreak when she begged to forget. The agony of letting her go. 3 years of watching from shadows. Every birthday. Every moment of grief over her mother. Unable to approach, unable to comfort, dying inside. Parking his carriage outside her wedding, praying she'd run, knowing she would because he knew her soul better than his own. Varek experienced her memories in return. Her mother's murder. The moment Matthias's hands closed around her throat, draining the light from her eyes. The terror of a 10-year-old girl watching from the doorway. Years of suppressing power she didn't understand, terrified of what she might become. Finding Varek. Learning to trust. Learning to love. The joy of those 6 months. The growing fear as the prophecy's weight crushed down. The nightmare visions of losing herself piece by piece. The desperate decision to forget. The memory witch's ritual. Waking up empty but safe. 3 years of feeling incomplete and not knowing why. Running from Matthias. Finding Varek's carriage. The strange sense of coming home to someone she'd never met. Their merged consciousness expanded, filling the cathedral with light that was neither pure gold nor silver shadow but both at once, woven together like silk and steel. Elara felt herself changing. Her body shifted, grew, transformed. Fur sprouted along her arms, not Varek's silver but gold like captured sunlight. Her hands became claws that glowed with luminescence. Her senses sharpened until she could taste the shadow corruption in the air, smell Matthias's ancient evil, hear her father's racing heartbeat. Varek changed too. His beast form took on aspects of her light. Golden patterns traced through his silver fur like veins of precious metal. His claws blazed. His eyes burned with combined power. They were no longer separate. No longer just Alpha and Lumenbearer. They were something new. A fusion the prophecy had never imagined because it assumed the binding would be forced, violent, one-sided. This was chosen. Equal. The merged entity that was Elara and Varek turned to face Matthias. For the first time in 300 years the Shadow Weaver felt fear. Impossible, he whispered, shadow creatures frozen around him. The binding destroys the Lumenbearer. The prophecy said. The prophecy, Elara's voice rang out, harmonized with Varek's deeper tone in perfect union, never accounted for love. They raised their joined hands. The light that erupted was blinding. It wasn't fire or lightning or any natural force. It was pure antithesis to shadow, the absolute negation of corruption. It swept through the cathedral like a wave, and everywhere it touched, shadow disintegrated. The corrupted creatures screamed as their darkness burned away. But instead of dying, they transformed. Shadow peeled from their forms like shed skin, revealing the people underneath, corrupted servants freed, restored to themselves for the first time in years or decades or centuries. Matthias raised his hands, summoning every scrap of power he'd stolen over 300 years. Shadow coalesced around him in a massive form, a giant made of darkness and despair, towering over the cathedral. Elara Varek met it head-on. The battle shook the earth. Shadow against light. Stolen power against chosen fusion. 300 years of evil against 1 moment of perfect balance. Matthias was ancient, powerful, cunning, but he'd never understood the difference between taking power and sharing it. The merged entity moved as one. Elara's strategic mind combined with Varek's warrior instincts. They flowed around Matthias's shadow strikes, countered his corruption with searing light, dismantled his defenses piece by piece. And slowly, terribly, Matthias Crane began to lose. "You've won nothing," he screamed as his shadow form cracked and crumbled. 7 bindings still await. She'll be gone long before. Elara Varek's clawed hand closed around his throat. "We'll face them together," they said in perfect harmony. The final burst of light was like a star going nova. It consumed Matthias's shadow form, burned through every stolen fragment of power, stripped away centuries of corruption until nothing remained but a withered old man, ancient beyond measure, finally caught by all the years he'd cheated. "Impossible," he whispered one last time. Then he crumbled to dust. The shadow barrier around the cathedral shattered. Varek's pack rushed in, weapons ready, but the battle was over. Slowly the binding released. The merged consciousness separated. Elara felt herself pulled back into her own body, but she was changed. Silver streaks wound through her brown hair. Her eyes, when she caught her reflection in a shard of broken glass, held flecks of Varek's winter blue. Varek stood beside her, human again, with golden patterns traced across his skin like tattoos. They were still connected. She could feel his heartbeat as clearly as her own, sense his emotions like her own thoughts. But they were separate, still themselves. "You did it," Kale breathed, staring at them with awe. Elara's legs gave out. Varek caught her, lowering them both to the ground. She was shaking, exhausted, fundamentally altered. "How do you feel?" Varek asked, his voice rough with concern. "Different," Elara managed. "Like I'm more but also less? Some memories are fading already. I can feel it happening." Fear flashed in his eyes. "What do you remember?" She focused, reaching for recent memories. They were there but distant, like looking through fog. "My name. The binding. But my mother's face is blurry. My childhood feels like someone else's story." "No." Varek's hands cupped her face. "Look at me. This is temporary. The shock of the binding. It'll stabilize." But they both knew he was lying. This was the price. The first payment of 7. Lord Ashwood stumbled toward them, freed from his chains. "Elara? Daughter, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what he'd done." Elara looked at the broken man who'd sold her into marriage. He should feel something. Anger, grief, forgiveness. But there was only strange emptiness where those emotions should be. Go home, she said quietly. Free our servants from their debts. Sell the estate if you must. Help other girls being sold into marriage. A path toward redemption. But I can't forgive you. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Her father wept, but Elara felt nothing watching him. That part of her had burned away in the binding. Varek helped her stand. Can you ride? I can try. The journey back to Blackwood Hall passed in a blur. Elara sat before Varek on his horse, leaning against his chest, trying to hold on to memories that kept slipping away like water through cupped hands. 6 more bindings awaited. 6 more moons. 6 more pieces of herself she'd lose. But when they finally reached the manor and Varek carried her to her chambers, laying her gently on the bed, she held on to one truth. She'd chosen this. And she'd chosen him. Stay, she whispered as he turned to leave. Varek sat beside her, taking her hand. I'm not going anywhere. Tell me something, Elara said, fighting to keep her eyes open. Something about me. Something I should remember. Varek was quiet for a moment, then began speaking softly. Your favorite flower is lavender, not because of the scent but because your mother wore it. You hum when you're concentrating, a lullaby she used to sing. You have a scar on your knee from climbing a tree to rescue a kitten when you were 7. With each detail the fog cleared a little. Memories solidified, anchored by his voice. Keep going, Elara breathed. You laugh with your whole body when something truly delights you. Your eyes are the color of mountain lakes in summer. You're terrified of spiders, but you'll face shadow monsters without flinching because you protect what you love. He squeezed his hand. What else? You're Elara Ashwood. Lumenbearer. My wife. My partner. The woman brave enough to choose her own destiny instead of running from it. The words felt real. True. Elara repeated them, feeling her identity settle back into place. Elara Ashwood. And you're Varek Blackthorn. The alpha who chose me over the world. I'd choose you again, he said. 6 more bindings to go, she reminded him, finally letting her eyes close. Then 6 more times I'll help you remember. As Elara drifted toward sleep, she felt Varek's hand in hers and knew that no matter what the prophecy took from her, she'd won something it never expected. She'd won someone who would fight to bring her back. Again and again and again. Together they'd found a way to choose each other. And that choice made all the difference. Dawn broke over the northern territories in shades of gold and silver. Fitting, Elara thought distantly, for the new world they'd created. She stood at her window, wrapped in one of Varek's cloaks because she'd forgotten which room held her own clothes. The thought should have frightened her. A week ago it would have. But now, after the binding, fear felt like a luxury she could no longer afford. Below, the courtyard bustled with activity. Varek's warriors moved through training drills. Servants carried supplies. Life continued, normal and mundane, while Elara tried to remember why any of it mattered. She knew it did matter. Intellectually, she understood that these people depended on her and Varek. That Matthias's death had freed the territories from centuries of shadow corruption. That she'd saved countless lives. But she couldn't feel it. The satisfaction, the pride, the relief. All the emotions that should have accompanied victory had burned away in the binding, leaving only ash. You're up early. Varek's voice. She turned to find him in the doorway, watching her with those winter blue eyes that now held flecks of her gold. He looked tired. He always looked tired these days, she realized. Had he slept at all since the cathedral? I couldn't sleep, Elara said. The words felt automatic, disconnected from any actual exhaustion she might feel. I kept trying to remember what my bedroom at the Ashwood Manor looked like. I know I lived there for 21 years, but I can't picture it. Pain flickered across Varek's face. He crossed to her and she let him pull her against his chest. His heartbeat was steady, familiar. She knew she loved him. The knowledge existed in her mind like a fact in a history book. But feeling it, actually feeling the warmth and tenderness that should accompany love, that had burned away too. It had blue curtains, Varek said quietly. You told me once. Blue like forget-me-nots because your mother chose them. Forget-me-nots, Elara repeated. The irony wasn't lost on her. She was forgetting everything, piece by piece, memory by memory. Did I like blue? You said it was calming. That when your father gambled away the household funds, you'd sit by your window with the blue curtains and pretend you were underwater where nothing could reach you. The image formed, hazy but present. Blue fabric. Sunlight filtered through. A younger version of herself, sad and trapped. The memory felt like it belonged to someone else, but at least it existed now. Thank you, Elara whispered. They stood like that, watching dawn paint the sky, and she wondered how many more mornings they'd have before she forgot how to be grateful. A knock at the door broke the moment. Kale entered, bowing slightly. Your Grace. My lady. We've had reports from the surrounding villages. The people freed from shadow corruption, they're recovering. Some don't remember being corrupted at all. Others. He hesitated. Others remember everything they did while corrupted, Varek finished grimly. And they'll need help living with it. Yes, Your Grace. We're establishing counseling centers, providing support. But the people are asking to see you both. To thank you. Elara's first instinct was to refuse. She didn't want strangers' gratitude for an act she could barely remember performing. But Varek's hand tightened on hers and she understood. This was part of her duty. Part of being the Lumenbearer. Even if she had to fake every emotion. We'll come, she said. The great hall had been converted into a reception area. Dozens of people waited. Men and women freed from corruption, families reunited, children who would grow up in a world without Matthias Crane's shadow hanging over them. They looked at Elara with reverence that made her skin crawl. Hero worship in eyes that had seen too much darkness. One by one they approached, offered thanks, told stories of how the light had freed them, restored them, given them back their lives. Elara smiled, nodded, said the appropriate words, all while feeling absolutely nothing. A young woman approached, tears streaming down her face. My lady, I was corrupted for 5 years. 5 years of watching myself hurt people, unable to stop, unable to die. You freed me. You gave me back my life. How can I ever repay you? The answer should have been easy. You owe me nothing. But Elara couldn't find the words through the numbness. Varek's hand on her shoulder steadied her. Repay her by living well, he said gently. By choosing kindness when you could choose cruelty. By remembering that light exists because people like you refuse to let darkness win. The woman sobbed and bowed, backing away. 3 more hours of this. 3 more hours of accepting gratitude she couldn't feel for sacrifices she could barely recall. By the time the last person left, Elara was shaking with exhaustion. Not physical, the binding had made her stronger in body. But emotional exhaustion from pretending to be human when she felt increasingly hollow. You did well, Varek said as they returned to the private wing. I lied to them. Every smile, every word, lies. You gave them what they needed. That's not lying. That's kindness. Elara stopped walking, turning to face him in the empty corridor. What if I can't remember how to be kind? What if the next binding takes that too, and the next, until I'm just... She gestured helplessly at herself. Power in a meat suit, destroying shadow but destroying myself in the process? Then I'll remind you. Varek cupped her face in his scarred hands. Every day. Every hour if necessary. I'll tell you who you are until you believe it again. 6 more bindings, Varek. The memory which said by the 7th, the last Lumenbearer couldn't even recognize her own face. You're not her. His voice was fierce. You have something she didn't. What? Me. A bond that's chosen, not forced. That has to count for something. Elara wanted to believe him. Wanted to feel hope. But hope, like so many other emotions, had become an abstract concept rather than a lived experience. Still, she had facts even without feelings. Fact. Varek was her husband. Fact. He'd proven himself trustworthy. Fact. The binding connected them in ways that transcended memory or emotion. Teach me, she said, how to be myself again. So he did. For the next 2 weeks, Varek became her guide to her own identity. Every morning he'd sit with her by the fire and tell her stories. Your mother's name was Meredith. She had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her left wrist. She taught you to read before you could walk, and you read everything: poetry, history, philosophy. Your favorite poet is Mary Shelley, and you used to recite Mutability when you were anxious. Elara listened, absorbing the information like a student studying for examination. Some details resonated, triggered half-memories. Others felt foreign, facts about a stranger. You're afraid of spiders, Varek continued another day. Terrified. But you'll face shadow monsters without flinching. You once told me it's because you can fight monsters but you can't negotiate with spiders. That made her laugh, a rusty and used sound but genuine. That does sound like something I'd say. Because it is. You said it 3 years ago while we were clearing the tower room of cobwebs. He smiled and she saw the relief in his eyes. Relief that she could still laugh. Slowly, painstakingly, Elara reconstructed her identity from Varek's memories. She learned her favorite foods, her childhood fears, her mother's favorite songs. She practiced being the person these stories described until the performance started to feel almost natural. But she knew it was still performance. Still going through motions rather than feeling genuine emotion. 1 month after the first binding, the memory which visited again. She found Elara in the tower room, surrounded by journals from 3 years ago, trying to recognize the handwriting as her own. How much have you lost? The witch asked without preamble. Most emotions. Many memories, especially from childhood. My sense of taste is dulled. Everything tastes like ash. Elara set down the journal. I can still think clearly. Still make decisions. But I feel like I'm observing my life through glass rather than living it. That's the binding's price. With each one the glass gets thicker. The witch settled into a chair. But you've found something the others didn't. Varek. Not just him. Partnership. The willingness to let someone else carry your humanity when you can't carry it yourself. The witch pulled out the locket she'd shown Elara before, the one belonging to the last Lumenbearer. She faced 7 bindings alone. Used this locket to try remembering herself. It didn't work because she had no one to anchor her to reality. But I have Varek. Yes. And that might save you. Or it might make losing yourself more tragic. The witch's blind eyes seemed to see through Elara's skull. 6 more bindings await. By the 7th you'll barely remember his name. Will your bond be strong enough to survive that? Elara didn't know. But she had to try. What choice do I have? She asked quietly. None. The shadow will return. It always does. Different forms, different names, but the darkness is eternal. As long as shadow exists, Lumenbearers must bind to stop it. The witch stood. But perhaps this time the story ends differently. Perhaps love is stronger than prophecy. After she left, Elara sat alone with the journals and the locket. She opened it, looking at the portrait of the woman who'd lost herself to power. Then she pulled out a small mirror and looked at her own reflection. Silver streaks wound through her brown hair. Golden flecks shone in her eyes. Her face looked harder, sharper, like emotion had been carved away, leaving only essential features. He was changing. Becoming something other than human. But when she looked closely, she could still see Elara Ashwood underneath. Still see the frightened girl who'd run from her wedding, the determined woman who'd chosen to fight, the partner who'd bound herself to Varek. Remember me, she whispered to her reflection. Please, remember me. That evening, Varek found her standing on the manor balcony, watching the sun set over the northern territories. 6 more full moons will come, Elara said without turning. 6 more bindings necessary to seal the darkness permanently. Each will cost more of my humanity. I know. Varek stood beside her. By the 7th binding I might not know you. Might not know myself. I know that too. So why are you still here? She finally looked at him. Why not leave while I can still remember you fondly? Why stay to watch me disappear? Varek was quiet for a long moment. Then, because the prophecy was wrong about one thing. It assumed the binding would destroy the Lumenbearer completely. That nothing would remain but power. Isn't that what's happening? No. He took her hand. Because I'm witnessing you. Every day I see who you are and reflect it back. When you forget kindness, I'll show you kindness until you remember. When you forget love, I'll love you until you feel it again. The prophecy didn't account for that. Someone choosing to be the mirror that shows you yourself when you can't find your own reflection. Elara felt something crack in her chest. Not emotion returning, not quite. But the possibility of emotion. The memory of what feeling had been like. I'll protect you, Varek said, the words he'd first spoken to her in his carriage. But now they meant something different. And I'll protect you, Elara replied. From the darkness. From the prophecy. From forgetting who we are. They stood together as the sun painted the sky in gold and silver, their colors woven together like their bond. Ready? Elara asked. Ready for the next binding, the next sacrifice, the next piece of herself she'd have to surrender. Together, Varek answered. Until the end. But standing there with his hand in hers, Elara realized something the prophecy had never considered. The end didn't have to mean oblivion. Not if they chose each other every day. Not if they made remembering each other the most powerful magic of all. 6 more moons. 6 more bindings. 6 more chances to prove that partnership was stronger than prophecy, that chosen love could survive even the loss of memory, that being witnessed and remembered by another person could anchor identity when everything else burned away. The prophecy had predicted salvation or oblivion, light or darkness, as if those were the only choices. But Elara and Varek had created a third path. A path walked together, hand in hand, where remembering each other became salvation itself. The moon would wax and wane 6 more times. The darkness would rise again in new forms, wearing new faces. The bindings would take their toll piece by piece. But for now, in this moment of sunset and new beginning, they had won something more precious than victory. They had won the right to choose their own story. And they chose each other. Elara turned from the sunset to face Varek fully. The golden light caught the silver streaks in her hair, the changed features of her face. She looked different. He felt different. But his eyes held recognition that transcended appearance or memory. Tell me again, she said softly. Who am I? Varek smiled, warm and genuine despite the grief he carried for what she'd lost. You're Elara Ashwood, Lumenbearer, warrior, my wife. The woman who chose to save the world even knowing what it would cost. And you? I'm Varek Blackthorn, the alpha lucky enough to be chosen by you. Your partner. Your anchor. The man who will spend every day reminding you who you are. Promise. I promise. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Somewhere in the territories, people slept safe for the first time in centuries. Children dreamed without shadow nightmares. Families reunited. The world healed. And here on this balcony, 2 people who'd lost and found and lost and fought to find each other again stood together facing an uncertain future. 6 more to go, Elara said. 6 more times I'll help you remember. They turned and walked back inside together, ready to face whatever came next. Because they'd discovered the truth the prophecy never imagined. That remembering each other, choosing each other, fighting for each other day after day, that was the most powerful magic of all. And together they were unstoppable. If you've made it this far in Elara and Varek's story, thank you for joining us on this journey through shadow and light. Their battle isn't over. 6 more bindings await. 6 more moons where Elara will lose pieces of herself and Varek will fight to bring her back. What do you think will happen in those final bindings? Will their bond be strong enough to survive? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale of chosen love defying prophecy, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories of fierce heroines, protective alphas, and the magic that happens when 2 people choose each other against all odds. Hit the bell icon to be notified when we continue Elara's story, because this is only the beginning. Until next time, remember, you are the author of your own destiny. Choose wisely. Choose bravely. Choose love.